Welcome to another episode of HangarReady. Today we're joined by the fighter Mafia. And for anyone that doesn't know, this is the group within Atlas Defense Industries Fleet Security Division that spends a lot of time, countless hours, dedicated to finding out exactly what it takes to fly and fight as a team. This is the third episode in this series, and today we have some very special announcements and a special guest. We're going to be announcing our first official training for our organization, and we're going to be interviewing one of the newest directors in fleet security. But before we get to that, let's check in with our host, Water Walker. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, thanks. So after the holidays, it's nice to be back on the show.
Yeah, I see you have some new toys. Was that something Santa brought you?
Mostly birthday and Christmas, yeah.
Okay. Speaking of ships, were you tempted by the holiday ship sale?
Only a bit. So I don't like the new Cutlass steel. It's a bit overpriced and what it's capable of. I'm more into the fighters, single seaters, dual seaters. So not in the big ships and not mostly in the drop ships. I already have the Valkyrie, so yeah, I'm not interested in another dropship.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here with us. Sartrius, how are you doing today?
I'm doing quite okay. Our Christmas period has been interesting because we all got sick, so it was very lazy Christmas.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm hoping that you are feeling better and enjoying the new year.
I am. New Year
Nice.
was good. We were almost fine by then.
Were you tempted by the ship sale this holiday season?
I'm still a bit sour about the whole Ion fiasco, and I'm saving up for a new throttle. So I was strong this year and didn't buy anything.
Okay. Yeah. Peripherals important. We'll talk about those. Thornister, hello. How are you?
I'm just peachy. Had a lovely Christmas, small vacation, and ready to crack on in the new year.
Fantastic. How about you? Were you tempted by anything in the latest ship sale?
Not really. The Liberator looked fun, but a bit too pricey for my taste. And all the other new ships, I either already have something or not interested.
Yeah, if the Liberator had beds and the ability to do a little more refuel and repair, I would have bought it. I'd have been certainly a sucker on that one. Drake, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
Fantastic. How was your holiday season?
The holiday was good. As far as ships, I did end up getting the Cutlass Steel just because it has the same name as me. So I figured I figured just that reason alone is enough for it. I'm not crazy about the design though. I'm hoping in the future that it'll either have like better shielding or better armor, something to justify that extra price. Because you can just take like 2 1/4 or 2 1/3 Cutlass blacks in for the same price, and you can still carry the same Marines. And if you lose one ship, you won't lose them all. You won't lose all your Marines. So right now it's kind of in a bad spot, but I'm hopeful, and I do like the name.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting concept as a ship. I do think the pricing is a little out of whack, but we'll see what happens. And for our newest host and a very valuable member that's been brought into our fleet security division, Frack, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. It was totally voluntary.
Yeah, you weren't pulled
no
into
pressure.
this at all. It's my favorite thing to do, to grab people and bring them on this show, whether they want to or not, right? So careful, you could be next. So how was your holiday season?
It was good. My daughter came up to visit, so that's been great. And it snowed on Christmas Day, so that was kind of cool. Had a little white Christmas, and no, it's been good.
Fantastic. And what about the recent ship sales? Were you tempted to open your wallet?
No, I have plenty of ships.
Yeah. Well, I ended up actually buying only one ship. I bought the Gladius, which I had off and on in the past, and I decided to finally commit to it again as another fighter that I need as being part of the fighter Mafia. But Frack, we're going to spend a little bit more time with you and talk about that you are a director in fleet security. Let's talk a little bit about, well, why did you choose ADI in the first place?
So I pledged into the game in 2015. It was actually the release of the Vanguard Warden as a concept that finally lured me into spending money. Of course, they followed up with the Saber like 2 months later, and I had to have that too. So I started putting money into the project pretty quickly once they got the hooks into me.
What about the Vanguard spoke to you personally?
Just, I mean, it was a picture then. It was just how it looked. It was like, yep, the visuals of this game, in addition to what I hoped it would become in terms of, you know, a space flight sim, because I'm a flight simmer. And I was a Wing Commander fan. So, you know, Chris Roberts' involvement, the way that it looked like the game was going to look, and it was, for me, the game that I had always waited for. And, you know, back then it was just in early development, you know, or mid development, depending on your take on the length of time of this project. But it just, if it lived up to its potential, it was going to be everything I wanted in a game. And so I went all in at that point.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I kind of have a little bit of similarities there, but what other games have you played? Like, what's been your background prior to coming to ADI?
So I mean, you know, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, so I go all the way back to Pong, you know, and I was an arcade kid growing up, and, you know, and then it's got into the early consoles. But, you know, once PC gaming took off, that was where I really kind of figured out where my real interest was, which for me, the one that really hooked me was a game called Air Warrior that I started playing in 1993, pre-internet. We would dial in on a modem there were two services that hosted that game, and for only $10 an hour, you could fly realistically modeled World War II airplanes and shoot each other out of the sky.
And was that the internet bill, or was that the game subscription fee?
That was the game subscription fee.
Wow, $10 an hour.
Yep. And,
I'd be broke if I did that for anything I do now. God.
So I chuckle at all of the discussion about how much money people put into a project like Star Citizen, or how expensive games are, because I mean, it's embarrassing how much money, you know, the hardcore players back then put in, you know, on a monthly basis, and then over the years, it's just, you know, I'm glad we got out of that kind of model in terms of online gaming. Got into a major squadron in that game. You know, day to day, it was kind of a free-for-all dogfight in the middle of the space kind of game. But where it really got good was the developers would actually give control of the game over to a game master, and we would do to scale recreations of historic World War II missions. So we would do Battle over Britain. We would do Midway, to where you could be flying for hours with no radar, trying to spot contacts, escorting bombers. And then the other side would be, you know, the defenders who would be looking for the bombers and attacking them. And that was where, you know, the game really went from, you know, day to day, it was just furballing. And then when you put it in context of an actual mission goal, it changed how everybody flew. So I got into a major squadron there, eventually got recognized enough that the development company hired me as an instructor. So when a new subscription would be made, if they wanted help learning how to fly, they would meet up with me and I would run them through how to fly. And that put me on a comped account, so I wasn't paying $10 an hour anymore, which was great. And then
but they were making money on you.
Yes. And then in 95, a group of players who were also programmers split off into their own company, and they created a game called Warbirds, which was kind of the next level of graphics. And I met with them in Houston in 95. That game launched in 96. And I took our squadron over to Warbirds and was the CO of the squadron at that point. Got a comped account there as an instructor, and then played that for, I think, 3 years. So yeah, I was big into the World War II flight sims in the 90s for sure.
So between that and the experience you had with Chris Roberts' games before Wing Commander, you were certainly interested in something that would expand on that, which
Absolutely.
I think talking about context and fighting is important. We're going to be talking about that coming up here in just a little bit more. But what brought you here to all of us to drink the ADI Kool-Aid?
Well, so the same year that I pledged, I knew from my previous experience being involved in, active, larger, back then in the other games we called them squadrons, but guilds, organizations, corporations, depending on how the game labels it. I was looking for a group that fit kind of how I approach this type of gaming, which I would probably describe as kind of a very professional level. Immediately when you look at ADI, you can see that structure is there. The way that the chain of command is set up, the way that the organization is designed, had that air of professionalism that I want in a group that I'm going to be involved with. And so I got invited and joined ADI that same year, maybe even the same month. And it has been everything I've wanted it to be up to this point. It's awesome.
I've learned so much. I mean, I've been with this group, I think it's almost a decade now. Started back with an Arma squadron for TF-88. And it's been a challenge. I mean, here I am actually hosting a show because of things I've learned. So it's kind of a crazy progression, and I've appreciated it. I think that's one of the greatest things here is if you up for the challenge, you will learn things just by the fact that we need people to do things. Speaking of which, what got you into staff? Why did you think that you wanted to take a deeper dive into ADI?
Yeah, so my progression within the organization, is a little bit odd in the sense that the state of the game when I joined, I got into it. Back then we didn't have the PU. Arena Commander had been released like 6 months previously, so you could do a little bit of flying in combat. The flight model was completely different than it is now. You had weapons that could be fully gimbaled, and so you could sit in a Hornet and play Candy Crush with your mouse with fully gimbaled weapons and not even have to maneuver if you didn't want to. That wasn't what I was looking for, and really I was interested in the PU. Going in and having Battle Royale and Arena Commander is not my thing. And that, along with being busy at work, put me on about a 2-year period where I wasn't playing much or involved in the org at all. I was still a member. In 2019, I retired. The PU obviously was in at that point. And once my job wasn't taking up my time and the persistent universe got to a point where we started to have some persistence, that was when I really dove all in. I joined staff the end of 2019, and having the benefit of being retired, I have a lot of time, to be involved both on the organization side in my role in staff, but also in playing the game itself and helping get our members where we want to get them, which is what we're here to talk about today when it comes to fighter combat.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the critical thing is, it's one thing to have a group of people you're working with. It's another when people are really dedicated, want to be here, have some relevant background and experience, because my experience in gaming that relates to what we do in Fighter Mafia mainly comes from like F-16 simulators. And right now I'm really big into an F-18 simulator. But Star Citizen is kind of a weird mixture of both a World War II-like aspect that Chris Roberts wants, and we have things like missiles that are in, combat fighter jets. So Frack's experience has actually been really critical in helping us see things in maybe more of that World War II era that I wasn't. So that complement of people working together is actually the magic that is the ADI organization as a whole, and specifically here in Fighter Mafia, which I really do enjoy the time with. Very lucky to work with this group of people. I think the training that we're going to talk about, people will see that come out. But speaking of which, you went through and you've obviously promoted through and you've shown the dedication and teamwork, and that's great. What did you think when you first came to the Fighter Mafia group?
I was super excited when my assignment changed over to Fleet Security Air Group. It's where I wanted to be. It's where my interest is. I knew, having watched previous Fighter Mafia episodes of HangarReady, kind of what the guys were working on. and was super excited to become a part of that. And I told the team right up front when I arrived that, I come over with a job to do in my position within the org, but in terms of the team, I'm here to learn from them and learn what they're doing. And I think the first day I told them, I'm not going to have an opinion about any of this until I've earned it. And then I set out to try to kind of earn my spot on the team. Tried to look at where they were at, what kind of roadblocks or hurdles they were facing. Did I have any ideas to kind of jump those hurdles and move us along? I hope that I did that, but mainly the culture within the team, the way that the team gels, the way that we work together, it has been the most fun I have had since I can remember in terms of gaming. This is a great group, and I just look forward every time we meet up. I look forward to it. I learn something new every day.
Yeah, and that's a key thing that we're teaching. I guess a box of tools that you can apply to different problems, and that box changes all the time you build more tools. But did you think then that you'd be dragged onto the actual episode of Fighter Mafia? I
did not. Happy to be here.
Yes. Well, now you belong to us as a collective. So you obviously have spent a lot of time within Star Citizen. You know more about the individual ship combat, which has been a great contribution. And you've helped apply that as a team concept. What are some of the things that you think helped you be successful here?
Well, I think first understanding the concepts that they were working on. The other is I do come from kind of a tactical training background in the real world. And so, this wasn't just about designing team tactics that would work, but it was also figuring out how to be able to efficiently teach this to pilots who are going to come in with a wide variety of experience or ability levels and make them effective as quickly as possible. The reality is we can't take a pilot and spend 100 hours with them, getting them up to a level. We need to use our size and our ability to train and our tactical concepts to make our pilots as a team as effective as possible, as quickly as possible, because our training has to scale for the size of the organization that we're in. And that's a gigantic challenge.
I mean, at 7,600 plus members, that is a big challenge. And I think that's something we're going to get into a little more detail on. And it's something that certainly shapes the things that we find in training when we're fighting each other versus how do we codify that and make something that we can replicate for lots of people. But I think at the end of the day, we've got something that does that and focuses enough quality that we can be effective as a team. On the Fighter Mafia here, we talked about on the first episode about the progression of peripherals that some of these guys went through. And I'm just curious, you've talked about some different games you've had. What peripheral kind of progression have you had in your gaming history?
Yeah, back in I mean, you could not fly our Warrior Warbirds without peripherals. And ironically, the development of those high quality peripherals kind of came in line historically with those type of games that were pretty popular at the time. So I actually lived right down the street from Thrustmaster when Thrustmaster became a company and started making joysticks and throttles. Back then, your choices were pretty much CH and Thrustmaster. I've used, back then I used and owned both. I was always looking for, the edge, but you didn't have the computing power or the software that we have now. And so tweaking all of those, and, back then is when we got into how to do curves and things like that to improve the sensitivity of your joystick to make you more accurate. So I had a box of peripherals back then in those early designs. Coming back in now, I didn't have anything when I first pledged for Star Citizen, and first time I ever flew a ship, it was mouse and keyboard. And part of that was I knew myself and I knew the rabbit hole I would go down. And I didn't want to do that until I was sure that this was becoming the game that I wanted it to be, and this was something that I was going to spend more time and money on. And so I started out with, obviously mouse and keyboard wasn't going to work for me. I'm a joystick pilot. I ended up getting a T16000 just to mess around with, to experiment with the flight model itself. And as the flight model changed, eventually went to dual T16000s, which I know you guys have talked about in the past, dual sticks versus HOTAS. I switched to a HOTAS with the X56. The stick, I just didn't like the stick. The throttle's fine, the stick is not. So now I've got a VKB Cosmos Hemo Premium on a Gunfighter Mark III base. It's a $400 stick. And it was like going from driving a Yugo to driving a Mercedes. And I'm looking forward to their throttle. But, you know, everybody has to make a decision on your own income and your budget and you know, what's good enough for what you're trying to do. For me, as into this as I am now, I'm willing to pay the premium, you know, to get, whether that's Virpil or VKB. Those are probably the two top stick makers right now.
Well,
and
it's
I'm
cheaper than the
VKB's throttle coming out.
It's cheaper than the $10 an hour you spent before. So
that is fact.
We're
that
talking
is 100% true.
relative things. In fact, I'd love it if our audience members would tell us what peripherals you fly with. I'm very curious to see that and kind of what the mixture is. So please comment in there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Do you think those things were critical to the point where you maybe could or couldn't be as successful joining the Fighter Mafia without them?
I think that you can be successful with any analog. You need analog input. And I think that you can be successful with, you know, relatively inexpensive joysticks. I think, you know, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And so for me, you know, I want to be as the best that I can be. And when you, in any sport or any hobby or any activity, there's a progression of equipment level that you have to commit to if you want to push yourself to be the best you can be. And that's where I'm at. It doesn't mean it's necessary or required. And not everybody can afford it. I recognize that, but you know, yes, you can still be successful without paying $400 a joystick. Absolutely.
Well, and I think it's like any bell curve, right? In that bell curve, you have the standard few deviations that most people are going to be in. And I think in that group, the benefits of using a, you know, HOTAS are going to be extremely relevant. There are going to be outliers on either side with a mouse and keyboard or maybe a gamepad who can probably do phenomenal things. I do think, though, there are a lot of benefits to it. I believe that's a lot more immersive for me. I personally am using a force sensing joystick, which is, you know, something that's on modern combat fighters. It's very interesting because you kind of have omnidirectional input in every direction as fast as you want because there's no movement delay. But here, I think we're really focused on getting the majority of people up to speed. I think it'll save our staff people time. I think it's a more enjoyable experience, but we certainly don't judge what peripherals you use, right?
Right.
With that, I think you have taken up more time than all of the rest of our hosts. They are now currently jealous. So we're going to switch to our next segment here, and we're going to talk about something you hinted on, training at an org level. Thornester, do you want to talk a little bit with us about what it's like to train I've been corrected. Jay said we have 7,735 members, not 7,600 plus. But do you want to talk about what that's like and kind of the direction we're taking?
Yeah, sure. So within ADI, we have the goal of being successful in an org level. And to achieve the org's ideals and complete our missions, it is, of course, essential that the members can execute the tasks that we assign them. So we, as Fighter Mafia, came together to figure out how we should do organized combat. I mean, we've all done some bounty hunting, maybe some delivery missions, whatever, but that's completely different than fighting in a group. even if you do some Arena Commander, it's still a 1v1 experience. So learning how to fight together effectively was the key task that we assigned ourselves. And the second goal was to figure out how to make that method successful for average pilots. Because, I mean, we all have seen some of the absolute fighter gods that exist in Arena Commander. I know I'm not one of them. That's most likely true for most of the ADI people. So ideally, we want a way to fight where we can make use of those numbers. I mean, I forgot the number already, but 7,000, what was it, 700 plus?
7735.
Well, if we can make use of all those numbers, we can easily outnumber the enemy. So if we can come up with a way that we can, even as more average pilots, defeat superior people by making use of superior numbers, because I mean, numbers is a quality all of its own, we will be successful as an org, and that is the key point behind what we've been doing within ADI, within the Fighter Mafia. Make sure that ADI will be successful. So we're not interested in the 1v1 fights. We're not interested in personal success. What we are interested in is making ADI successful.
Well, and that's what this group is about. And I'm curious in our audience, how many people have actually tried to fly as a group with like a lead and a wingman, and maybe what their experience was, and how can we teach these members by codifying it into standards, right? Do you want to talk more about the training sessions and the certificates?
Yeah. So after we figured out how we would be successful fighting in a group, we then had to figure out how to teach this to our members. And I mean, taking someone and teaching them one-on-one how to fight together with you is doable. But teaching 7,700 and what was it, 53?
35.
People individually is just never, ever going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we can't do that one-on-one in every event, right? There's just too much. And we needed to do things like, reduce staff time. And I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit about the specialist program and what we're doing there.
Yeah, so we've within ADI, we've come up with a couple of ways to more efficiently teach our members how to be successful. So and one of the ways we've come up with is to have classes. I mean, most of the hosts here on the show have been teaching to fly formations, but we still face the issue that we need simply more people. And in the past, we've only been using staff members in ADI to teach, and we just don't have the numbers to teach all the things we need to teach. So we've come up with, actually ADI senior leadership came up with the specialist program, where we invite key members within the organization who've shown an ability and a willingness within their field of specialization to excel and to introduce and to assist other people within that field. So we are very happy that we've yesterday certified our second specialist, and he will soon join us in teaching the classes to get the rest of ADI up to speed.
Very good question that Jay asked. What's the difference between specialists and staff members? So if you're in Atlas Defense Industries and you want to give more, like Frack and the rest of us have decided to do, there is another level that you can go into, and that's our staff training program. The staff training program really is designed to help identify people that, have the dedication and time and, kind of figure out where they want to be and have them work with the org to do some basic tasks. Once that sort of is over, there's an introduction phase, then you get moved into, potentially a division or a staff shop. And from there, kind of your own level sort of dictates where you'll go. And staff members, there is an expectation that they are going to spend time doing things that aren't just playing the game. For as much time as we spend flying and fighting, there's more hours of discussion. I don't even know how many hours of just talking or texting Frack and I have just talking about what we want to do, right? So there's a lot of things that happen beyond just being able to play the game. Specialists are people who are kind of subject matter experts, know an area, and we can use them as instructors for that small segment. They maybe don't want to do some of the other background work, but they are very useful to us because, you can't learn from reading or a self-certification things like formation flying or marine training or demonstrating of competency, right? So we need those people to augment the staff to help us. So I'm very thankful for the staff. They're very important to us. And I hope that's an explanation that Jay is going to be happy with. But they are an important part of our cadre. So I guess if you want to talk a little bit more, Thornister, to kind of wrap this up about going from simple to complex, kind of the basic formations to flying in combat as a team and kind of that moving target that we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So the introduction we teach people is as how to fly. So for that, it's just the extreme basics, learning to fly together in a team, the basics of communication. It's a core competency skill that you need to have in order to fly as a combat pilot, especially once the combat scales up and the battle size grows. Collisions start to happen, and I mean, dying to enemy fire is one thing, but colliding and dying in a friendly collision, that's a big no-go. So from the basics of flying classes, we scale up in complexity, where we first teach simple combat, and eventually, when people prove that they can handle it, we scale up into even more complex and larger combat scenarios.
Yeah, and now
even the truly big ones we'll talk about later on the show, I believe.
Yeah, and it's one thing to just have a fight. It's another thing to have a context or a purpose of that fight and understand that mission. We are going to talk about the actual steps of training and get into our some details of that. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back. And this is the part of the show that I've been really excited about and is really years in the making, not just in concept, but in action from the members of the Fighter Mafia, members of leadership and senior board members. But today we are actually announcing our first training, and it is going to be coming up here in March. And it's going to be our element combat training, where you're going to be working as a lead and a wingman. And it's called FOC 1, Foundations of Combat 1. And this is something that, while everybody was enjoying the holidays, the Fighter Mafia group and the Fleet Security Division just put in a ton of time to get this approved, to get it out, and to start working on it. And I'm really excited because this is the first part of where the rubber's going to meet the road of what we've been showing in our podcast to actually getting down to training all of our members. So in this, we have to think about a couple of things and just remember that we are trying to make things effective and achieve a goal as an org. And it's not about flying in as an individual. It's about what you do as a team and what maybe that mission is. Now, when we're talking about doing this training, it's a bit different. And I want to open this up as a discussion with our Fighter Mafia because we've been talking about this and I think it's important. But for instance, when you go into, say, being a fighter pilot, you're already been a pilot. You get some training that goes into things like plane-specific training, maybe some ground school, some basic flight. But when it comes to basic wingman, Sir Trias, you've been noted before as a good lead. How do you feel about the training and where it is and how it's going to help people become a better wingman?
I would say that it's going to help tremendously. After all, we have 7,700 members plus, and to get as many of them as possible comfortable flying and communicating, most importantly, calling out specific things or understanding brevity that we use and being comfortable flying close to another person. That's mainly the purpose of FOC1.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to understand that, these basics that come before this, people are kind of doing on their own, and versus studying and, taking tests and lots of pressure, people are free to go out and crash or, fail on their own. And we're trying to work with that at the end. Frack, you said you were an instructor for teaching some people. Now that we're getting into some offensive exercises, what do you think are some of the keys for people to be successful in FOC1?
Well, I think like you were talking about earlier, the progression of real life fighter pilot training really follows along similar to the certification levels that we offer within ADI. When you said earlier, this is our first training, this is our first combat training within the tree. And so we've got multiple certifications prior to this, from basic flight to basic combat flight to foundations of flight, which is formation flying. And then once you get through that at an adequate level that demonstrates that you have mastered the ability to control your ship under very specific parameters, which is exactly what happens with fighter pilots. If you can't pass formation flying, you don't get to move on to combat training, even though the U.S. military does not fight in close formation, welded wing type parade flying. It's a demonstration of the ability to control your aircraft. We have similar requirements because friendly collisions are real, and if you become more a danger to your wingman than you are to the enemy if you're not properly controlling your ship. And when we do formation flying at 150 meters a second, if you can't handle that, then you're going to have even more difficulty at 400 meters per second or 300 meters per second, where it requires the same level of precision, if not more, especially in terms of prediction. So there is a progression of expectation with your ability level as a pilot. Well, you recognize that everybody has gone out there and killed NPCs, maybe even killed other players. So there a lot of times is pushback on the importance of formation flying. But I can tell you now that we're into the combat training that the skill level that is developed in doing that is critical to being successful in our combat program. And it's not about, we're not fighting 500 meters off each other's wing at 400 meters per second, right? That's not what this is about, but it is about developing a level of skill that we expect so that you can be more successful when you move into actual combat as a team.
Well, and I think something that's really important to understand with that is we've talked about it's a progression. We have had multiple, probably, I don't even know how many progressions we've had of things we've learned and changed about how we're doing combat before we got to doing FOC1. But each of those things depends on a level of skill for us to adapt. And that skill set is critical in terms of just giving you the baseline basic functions. Because, yeah, when we're fighting, you're going to see us extend that distance a bit, but you're still staying within an effective proximity to your wingman. You're still doing things like deconfliction that we're going to get into. Some of the things down the future that we're going to get into is things like intercepts and escort and doing things like CAS and CAP and, really getting into large scale operations. And the challenge of compressing this into an ADI trainable format has been really critical. I know everyone here has had some level of involvement in getting that codified. Waterwalker, how do you feel about what we learned, what we've applied, and how we put this into an actual training?
Yeah, so most important thing I think here is that we need a training which is transferable when the game is changing. So we are still in an alpha with Star Citizen. So training on the actual flight model would be bad. So we need a training which can take over even if the flight model change. So we are focusing on the tactics, on the brevity, how rejoins working, how we can avoid the nose-to-nose fights you see on most of the PvP, where you have both fighters always pointing with the nose to each other and circling around. I mostly call it flea fights, because we are fighting as a group. So we have more ships than our opponent. So one can be someone who's been hunted, and the other then needs to know, okay, I can get behind the enemy and shoot them from behind. And these are mostly tactics we're trying to evolve and looking for a way how to easily teach it. So if we come with our full set in one training or in one session, that would be too much for normal people. So we need a progress there. So Foundations of Flight was our evolved training for formation flying. Now we have FOC1, where we are focusing on an element. So only the wingman and the winglead, not a full flight, and how they interact together against an opponent. And this will then carry over to the FOC2 class, which will come out somewhere later this year, hopefully, where we will fight as a complete flight, so 4-ship versus 2 ships, for example. And even in the FOC1 training, we already have live fire action. So there's a possibility that someone could die inside of the training, but the training is laid out that we are only damaging the ships and not killing the ships. So we are mostly deactivating weapons and trying the different tactics.
We'll sacrifice you for training happily. So the basic requirements to get into FOC1 are the basic self-certs of basic crew, basic flight, and basic combat flight requirements. You'll also need to do foundations of flight, and in that, you'll need to demonstrate the proficiency as a wingman. Thornister, do you want to talk about the things we look for and how someone could maybe prepare and practice for that so that they could get into FOC1?
Sure. So what we're looking for is the ability to control your ship under basically all the circumstances that you will meet in a formation flight. So you'll need to show that you can handle the basic maneuvers, making turns, making loopings, that you can join a group quantum using correct communication and correct procedures. It's basically the basic thing you need to show is that you can fly as part of the group, that you can be an asset to the group in flying, that you will not crash into your wingman, so that we can trust on you to do your job. The way to prepare for this, well, we have a pretty decent student guide. So if you sign up for a Foundation of Flight class, in that sign up, there is a link to the student guide. Read that document. It will explain everything we will do in the class with all the procedures, all the communication that you'll need to know. And other than that, it's just a matter of doing it. It's literally experience. It's, in the end of the day, it's not something you can learn from a book. You need to do it. You need to get it into your fingers.
Yeah, and some of those keys are in the maneuvers are controlling your ship, the speed changes, the relative positions to your lead, rejoins, and brevity. And those things are all the basic keys that need to be demonstrated in Foundations of Flight to move on to FOC1. Speaking about moving on to FOC1, Frack, do you want to talk a little bit about the situational awareness that's changes and is added on over Foundations of Flight?
Yeah, I mean, the key to being successful, the element is the foundational piece that then scales out into a flight, which is a 4-ship, and then you can get into multiple flights and create squadrons. But the element is that's the core DNA of fighting. And the key to being successful at that, and everybody who's played this game for any length of time has probably experienced the the player bounties, blockading Porto, and so everybody jumps into their ships and flies up to fight them, and one by one everybody gets picked off because these are superior pilots who do this all day every day. And what is lacking there is the coordination, communication, and team tactics that allow you to press the advantage of your numbers. So that we are building and have built tactics that frankly would have worked in Air Warrior in 1993 and will work here regardless of flight model changes. But it's not built around specific maneuvers. It's not built, it's built about understanding the geometry of a fight, which most people don't think about, and leveraging that to get the best possible gun solutions on the enemy so that you can beat them or drive them away. Because we talked earlier about context. We're not out there trying to compete with other people. If our job is to escort an asset from point A to point B and it gets attacked, and we stalemate a fight so that that asset can get away and we can get away, we've won. Killing people is great, and we do that regularly, but it's not a meet at high noon and duel each other to see who's better. Our mission is bigger than that. It's not tied to ego or trying to demonstrate that we're superior pilots. We're trying to achieve a mission or a goal in whatever we're doing.
I think I just watched an advertisement for why you should join ADI. But I think that, those things are the keys, right? The benefit of this group is having the time and effort of them spent identifying, breaking these things down and making it so that anyone who is a part of ADI and goes through the steps to get here is going to have a significant benefit from all of that time. In other words, you don't have to do it all yourself, right? You can do it as a team. In terms of, situational awareness, another topic that comes up is head tracking. Drake, what do you think about the needs of head tracking and its importance in foundations of combat?
Well, head tracking is quite important. I know when I first started, I was originally playing with a keyboard and mouse, and I saw I think it was an ad on ADI for the Tobii eye tracker. And I was thinking, oh, that would be nice to be able to look around your cockpit. So I got it. And when I set it up and started using it, I realized how much it aided in my, as I said, situational awareness. I was able to look left, right, up, and down. I could actually see MFDs that were below my field of view. Before I would have to hold down the F key and look down to see some of the MFDs, but it allowed me to look anywhere I wanted to in the cockpit. It really kind of increased my immersion, and it just it allowed me to just kind of suck me in, made me much more aware of my surroundings, and I think it made me a much more engaged pilot. I was able to know what was going on around me. Yeah.
For me, go ahead, Thornister.
I would even say that it's not just for the foundation of combat that head tracking is really nice to have. Even in foundation of flight, in formation flying, it's a huge help to be able to look on the side and see what your lead is doing.
Yeah, and for my experience set with doing a lot of combat fighter sims, if you lose the visual, if you're in a dogfight, if you lose the visual of your enemy combatant, you're in a lot of trouble, and you begin to have limited options. So Star Citizen does have the advantage of you can target your person and it points an arrow to the direction of where they are, so you can get reoriented. But in that time, you can lose a lot. So I think maintaining the situational awareness is critical. Frack, when you were teaching people, what was your experience? And I don't even know, was there head tracking at that time? How did you guys deal with that?
There was no head tracking. There was no voice comms. So all communication had to be done with shorthand keystrokes, and views had to be done on the number pad, which means you were constantly taking your hands off the controls to try to do all the things you need to do to be an effective pilot. We're spoiled right now, frankly, having head tracking, voice comms, all these things that if I'd had it in the 90s, just would have been next level, and here we are. So yeah, for me, again, it's similar to peripherals in the sense that, can you be successful without them? Yes. Can you be the best you can be without them? No. I think head tracking is arguably more important than controls. When I'm fighting, I'm rarely looking out the front of my ship. Heads on a swivel. Not only am I tracking where the enemy is, I'm tracking where my wingman is, because I'm trying to shape that fight in a way that gives us the biggest advantage. And you have to be monitoring ranges, closure rates, trajectory, the vector. How fast they're going affects how much they can change that vector. So you get predictive in that sense. And so you get 10 seconds ahead of the fight. You play chess, and trying to get our pilots to think to that level where you're not just pointing your nose at the enemy and reacting to whatever they're doing. That's where we get people to the next level of combat. Because although the flight model is different here than it is in DCS or other flight sim games, there is geometry to these fights that once you start to see that and understand it, it allows you to fight ahead of the moment and actually employ team tactics that allow you to not just tail chase and constantly rotate your ship so it's pointed at the pip and get pip focused. That's not the way to be successful.
Well,
and that is exactly why formation flying is so important as the basic skills for combat. It teaches you to look out of your side window and still fly, can still control your ship.
And there will be some more advantages for head tracking or even eye tracking. So you can already see it in the missile operator mode that this is stick to your view. So if you're moving your head with head tracking, your target circle for the missiles will also move. And on some of the Spectrum posts, there was from CRG, there was also something mentioned that they want to include eye tracking with the Tobii eye tracker into the game, so that you can mostly target a ship with your eyes and then press a button and have a target lock on them. And that would be a great benefit in fighting. So you don't have to cycle between targets in a fight. You can look at the target, press a button, and have this target locked, and can fire missiles on them or try to focus on them to shoot your guns.
Well,
so
this
head tracking and eye tracking will be very important in the future.
Well, this will be technology that's been around since the 1980s, so I'm glad we're going to have it in current, jets in this time frame. But, we won't be too critical on that particular topic. I do think there is another thing that's really important that eye tracking helps, and that is, I was shocked to find that the combat now in Star Citizen is more about the angles, and it is more almost of a traditional dogfight in some sense. But unlike atmospheric dogfight that I do, the ships can rotate on axis and you can have different orientations to those ships. So not just knowing where your enemy is, but knowing his orientation to you and how that's changing in real time impacts what you need to do as a pilot. So the situational awareness, I think, is even more critical, because if you end up in the wrong orientation, you can end up showing, your top or your bottom to your enemy's guns, and you just don't want to do that, right? So I'm glad it's here. I certainly use it. I think someone might be able to be successful without it, but I think it's something that if you want to be a higher level pilot in Star Citizen or any flight sim, that situational awareness is just unreplaceable. So I'm very glad that we have that. I guess I'm curious if anybody in the audience has had any collisions or crashes due to loss of situational awareness, and I'd love to hear about those in the chat. But getting into that, I have a question also for anyone in our audience. This is a quote from someone in ADI's leadership, and the quote is, "Getting killed by the enemy is bad. Getting killed by your wingman is unforgivable." Does anyone want to take a guess in our audience as to who in ADI might have said that? Do invisible asteroids count? I want to say yes for comedy, but no. I've been through that too. I think you could chalk that one up to Chris Roberts and Star Citizen as an issue. But if anyone does know, I'm curious if they know where that quote comes from. On that topic, Thornister, do you want to talk a little bit specifically about deconfliction and the importance to making sure that we have that nailed down in the foundations of flight for things like rejoin and combat before we get to FOC1, because we don't really want to have that problem here, right?
Well, yeah, it's essentially a matter of efficiency. If we teach deconfliction early on, you are already used to looking around you to be aware of where your wingmen are, so that when the confusion of an actual fight is piled on top of that, like we talked before about bucket sizes, the load on your brain of a fight, especially as fights grow in size, you need to have that skill already in your fingertips and in your eyes, and need to be on a swivel so that you simply will not crash into your wingman.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, every skill we're talking about, some people might think that you're really good at flying, and for that one person doing one thing, you probably are. But coming into this, you're gonna have to take a step back, learning about formations and all these different steps, because every little thing becomes important. Every skill has a new meaning and a new purpose. And that purpose is to work together to fly and fight as a team. And what that takes is a different set of skills. Speaking of which, Sir Treyas, do you want to talk a little bit about the need for communication and brevity and understanding, the importance of communicating with your wingman?
Besides deconfliction, proper communication is the difference between fighting in an organized group and just random people shooting the same targets. It makes the situation so much clearer for everyone. Your status, what do you see, what are you doing, it's a must. And we are still working on specific commands we should use. We thankfully have a list of brevity that we can refer to, and it's very useful to learn that really well. And we also find that people often go silent over the fight, and that is a big problem, and we need to still work on that. And yeah, it helps a lot.
So I think you bring up an important topic that we've been talking around and we've talked about before, but we haven't specifically mentioned, and that is building your pilot bucket. Each one of the steps from the beginning of Foundation of Flight all the way down to where we are now in this discussion, you are building up more ability to do multiple things at once, which versus doing something on your own is a huge increase in difference and requirements. Frack, what do you think about the progression of building that bucket, and how important do you think that is to be successful?
Oh, I think it's super important. It's easy. I mean, the reality is when you go out and fight on your own, you just have to worry about yourself. And when you have to worry about a wingman or 3 other wingmen in a flight, that just increases the amount of information that you need to process in real time in a game where the speeds are extraordinary compared to traditional flight sims. And again, it goes to why the more you can get ahead of the shape of fight by processing specific information, like I talked about earlier, to try to empty the bucket as much as you can, then the better you are able to handle the situation that you're dealing with. If you don't handle that and you're constantly behind the curve and on your back foot, then you just become reactive, and at that point you're just a victim of the circumstances instead of somebody who is controlling and quarterbacking that fight.
So now we're talking about the individual skill to fly as a wingman in the right position, the situational awareness to know what's happening with the fight and how to support them, the thinking through the fight, and the communicating of everything that's happening as needed in real time. It is a huge thing. It takes a lot of, processing power and that, pilot bucket to be fairly large to do this in the right way. But I think all of these things are attainable by anybody within this or given enough time and practice. Drake, what do you think about that? Do you think there's anything here that isn't that anyone could do? I mean, do you think there's anything that's going to prevent someone from actually achieving this?
No, just practice, practice, practice. I know when I first started, I was, basically just going to be like a trader or maybe like an explorer. And then as I started playing and started playing with other people in the org, I started learning how to like fly in a group. And that's when I started getting interested in the foundations of flight and started taking those classes. And it kind of taught me like how to fly in a group, how to stay organized, how to use brevity to like let your main wing leader know that you're saddled and in position, or letting him know that you understood what command he was giving. All that kind of stuff kind of builds up. It allows you to kind of like it's like a force multiplier. It allows them two pilots to kind of act as one pilot. One person could be trying to distract the enemy and draw him away from the other pilot, while the other pilot kind of can come in and maneuver into a advantageous position and get guns on and get a firing solution. These are all kinds of things that we are trying to teach people how to do with this program, and yeah, we're excited about it.
Yeah, and I think the consistency is key. Regular practice, regular training, and I think this is something that maybe is really important as well. Is we can teach the tools, and then you have to apply them to different situations. But just attending the classes alone isn't going to be sufficient to be competent against people who are out there that we know are practicing and training to do these skills. If you want to be able to beat with you and your wingmen some of the top tier pilots, even if they're solo, it's going to take extra practice and passion and time beyond just the training time that we do, right? You're going to have to take these skills and then apply them. Thornister, what do you think about that?
Use it or lose it. Unfortunately, it's that simple. So luckily within ADI, we regularly organize org operations. There are classes almost every week you can join over and over again. And of course, you can connect with a friend in game and do bounties together and practice it on your own. Of course, it's much more fun to do it in an org op. Lots of people flying together, have fun. And I think we'll be talking about that in a little bit. One other thing you can do, which Frank and I did the other day, team up together and do some PvP bounties. And let's just say that what we are teaching, it works. It works well.
Yeah.
Plus, we had a lot of fun doing it, didn't we, Frank?
Yes, a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in just a second. Frank, did you want to say something about this?
Yeah,
topic?
I did. What Thorne said is absolutely true. And like anything, any sport, any hobby, there's a progression of skill level, and you can always get better and always be trying to get better. But I can tell you from the testing that we've done with brand new people, we brought staff members in and put them through this 2-hour course. I will take any of them on my wing any day in combat versus if we just took random members or random people and put them into a combat situation right now where they have nothing, the skill level progression as a team to PvP after that 2-hour class, the difference is night and day. It's the level that we can get you to as a pair, as an element in 2 hours. It's a game changer for PvP. So when we're doing Xenothreat and we're doing Jump Town, and an enemy player comes in and picks a fight, and we've been doing that for the last 2 weeks, and we haven't always had, because our number of people who are trained is so small at this point, because we haven't officially launched the next step of the program. Give me 10 people, and those fights would be completely different. And we hold our own as it is. I can tell you, we start pairing people off that's been through this 2-hour class, and it's going to be night and day even to what we have going on now.
And see, that's the part that I love. What first drew me into gaming and even joining ADI before we were ADI was flying and fighting as a team and working together. And I love that. All the work, all the time, all the effort. when you have that feeling of, man, we're doing this, is working, that's a great feeling. And I hope somehow with the training and all we've done, we can still maintain that enthusiasm and people see that when it comes to the end, of how exciting that is and how motivating it is and how much it'll make you want to, keep coming back and, refining those skills and being a better wingman or a flight lead. Before we go on to the next thing, I'm going to try to say this name, but Spoctavian Augustus, I believe, if I've got that right, he guessed it correct. JC is the one who said that getting killed by the enemy is bad, but getting killed by your wingman is unforgivable. And that gets into, we had another comment up here. I got to scroll back up. Motomaru talked about, had a pattern of clipping his friend's target when they're converging on a pip. We have specific things we do to avoid that issue. We want to maintain the integrity of our ships. We want to maintain the things we do so that we can fly and fight and not cause extra damage and still be combat effective. We have hopefully seen these things, but I promise you, if you come in through all of this training and you point up something that we haven't seen or is a better way, we're going to go test it and try it, and it may end up being part of, what we do. So this is a fluid thing. It's one of the reasons why consistency is key, because things are going to change in Star Citizen. We're going to identify new things. And so, this first combat training is a 2v1 and two, good guys working together against a bad guy and what that means. Coming soon, we're going to do FOC 2, so Foundations of Combat 2, which is full flight combat with 4v how many ever. And that gets, even more compressed in difficulty and ability to do. But we're excited to do where we are and to talk about the future. But let's talk a little bit. Frack and Thornister, you guys did go into and tested some of the latest things we're working on and teaching in the PvP. So let's talk a little bit about that. What was your experience like?
So it wasn't on purpose. It was kind of coincidental. We happened to both be on at the same time, and we were on a server that had an unusually high number of player bounties. So we decided to wing up and go, chase some bounties, having no idea what we were going to run into. And over the course of a couple of hours, we caught 6 of them, went 6-0, didn't take any damage. And one of them was a 2v2 that we won. And it's just, again, you can tell immediately in a fight how coordination and communication and having a foundation of how you approach these fights, how not only does it give you the ability to kill other players, but it increases the survivability and the safety level, because every one of those fights, if we had latched on to, a top 0.5% pilot in the game, we would have been able to just leave, because it gives us the ability to put pressure on people and kill them, but it also gives us the ability to disengage at will. So, it was a little bit of an impromptu test, because we do work a lot within our own little training bubble. And so to get out there into the wild and be successful at it just in one quick little afternoon, it was good for confidence to say, yes, we're on the right track and it actually works out in the wild.
Well, and it's good that you mentioned that, because the fighter mafia has fought each other so much that we do need a fresh perspective on occasion. We had a Zuzu come in before with us. We've had you come in, but we do it a lot, and we do need that fresh perspective. And seeing that go out there, and the success and the confidence that builds is very important. Thornister, what was your experience like with that?
It was a huge boost to morale. Learning that all the time and effort we spent on creating this program, that it actually paid off. It was even proven even more, because the day after, I did one of those 9-tail things, and without any other ADI members, and some PvP guy showed up and he handed my arse to me. So yeah, 1v1, I'm not that good, but in a coordinated fight, yeah, we absolutely, we would have easily won that fight.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to have those fundamentals be tested in that way. I think it's important to build that confidence and to just get out and do something a little bit different. Speaking of different, we're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some blue on blue ops where we put a little more context into our fight. If you have any questions, please post them up, and we'll see you back here in a few minutes. Welcome back. We have a few questions from the audience. Waterwalker, you want to go ahead and address some of those for us?
Yeah, sure. So QGIX asked us for how many attended the FOF and FOC class. So it's a bit complicated. So we had some hundreds signups from different members for the FOF classes in the last year, and they attended multiple times. So it's complicated to count it, but we ran a lot of things of guys through the FOF class. And for the FOC, so we developed it last year, had some visitors from other divisions in it to test things out, how good the teaching is, how we can transport the information to the students. We will open it up for some private invitations in February. So some people will get a direct message from us, and then it will be opened up in March for the public. So FOC has run about a dozen, like Jay already said on the chat. To go to the FOC, you need to be signed off from a foundation of flight session. So we need to see that you have the availability to have a correct flying. So we don't want to have pilots in an Aurora as human torpedoes flying into other ships. We want to have you control your ship and don't strafe into other people. So we want to see this in an FOF class, and then you get a sign off and to saying, hey, okay, you are good to go to join the FOC class. And yeah, this will be open up. So it's a good time to sign up for the FOF classes at the moment. So the next will be next Sunday. And then mostly every week we have a class so that you get the approval or the sign off now so that you can directly start in March to participate in the FOC classes.
We have another question here from Motomari. Do you want to address that, Waterwalker?
So for the search for FOC, you only need the basic certifications, basic crew, basic flight, and basic combat flight, and have attended the FOF class and shown that you are good at flying and got the sign off.
And again, all of these steps are designed to help you be successful, to build the basic skills in the pilot bucket that's required to do what we're doing and to move into bigger things like blue on blue ops, which is the next segment here.
But real quick, Josh.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah. So to be clear on what Water just said, because we are going to be rolling this out, everybody needs to go through Foundations of Flight, and you need to perform at a level where an instructor approves you to go to Foundations of Combat. Don't take it personally if you go to Foundations of Flight and your flying isn't up to the standard that we need for you to go to Foundations of Combat. If we let just people who attended move on, it would end up wasting class time because you don't have the basic skills to be able to do what we're trying to teach at that next level. So it just means you need to take Foundations of Flight as many times as it takes, to get your skill level there. Our staff is always, willing to help people who are struggling and give them assistance with that. But, I didn't want people to leave here thinking, oh, if you sign up for one class, you're automatically going to get to move on to the next level. You do have to perform within that class.
So Spoctavian Augustus asked a question that I didn't even think about. What would be the time frame? Say you were new and you've done all the basic self-certs. How much time frame do you think it would take to get from FOF to FOC?
Is that for me?
Yeah, Frack, sorry, go ahead.
It depends. People who come here with flight sim experience, who have done formation flying before and have adapted that to this flight model, can pick it up very quickly. Other people who don't have that experience, it can take longer, and it's completely up to each individual's ability to understand how to make the maneuvers that we need. It is somewhat control system or peripheral determined. Mouse and keyboard pilots have a harder time than joystick HOTAS users, because you need the ability to control your speed, down to kind of the 2 or 3 meters per second kind of level of control. And you need that analog input to be able to hold your position with the lead when they're going through these maneuvers. So we have had mouse and keyboard members who could do it. We have a certification that comes out of FOF that's required for combat pilots called Combat Flight 1, which is an actual formation flying exam that you have to pass to get that certification. We are not right now requiring that level of performance. What we can't do is let people go into combat training who have demonstrated in an FOF that they just can't perform the maneuvers, and they need more work. And so there's a middle ground there between just not being able to do it and being CF1 tested ready. If when we launch this program, that middle ground is determined to be not good enough and we're having issues in FOC with how people are flying, then we may have to revisit upping that standard in the future. But we want to get as many people as possible into this program and through this program. And so we're hoping the line we've drawn right now is going to be that correct balance point for that.
Well, I mean, you literally can't increase the difficulty if you can't perform at the previous level. And
Right.
That's the whole point is it's not trying to eliminate anybody. We want as many people as possible to be functional. We need as many combat pilots and people to understand this as possible, because let's see, there's only a few large orgs out there that might, have some competing interests at some time, right? So we know combat's going to happen. We know that we will be tested. If we're trying to escort a whole series ship or whatever, we need to be able to provide the right kind of security. And that's a whole different thing than even just fighting, because now you've got a different context. So I would encourage people that are curious about that time that really, we're going to have some staff limitations and some things. But right now, the more people that sign up, the more we'll ramp it up as much as we can. But that next progression level is really determined on you and demonstrating proficiency. Anybody else want to add on that before we switch on to the last segment?
Well, I know that the next Foundation of Flight will be, I think, next weekend on about 8 p.m. ADI time. And I think the sign-up sheet should show up on Monday, possibly Tuesday. But yeah, if you want to sign up for the next Foundation of Flight, look for that to pop up on the forums, like on Monday evening or so.
Okay. Anyone else before we move on?
Spoctavian is asking, he wants to go down this track. What can he do independently in the weeks leading up to the trainings to prepare? I could go an hour on that. At its most basic form, you need to understand the maneuvers used in Foundations of Flight, in formation flying. There is a student guide for Foundations of Flight, so I'd recommend looking that up and reading that. And then, the pieces that are missing for most people coming in are things like in basic flight cert, if you've already done it, there's a section about the TVI, the true vector indicator. If you're not constantly aware of that when you're flying day to day, you need to make yourself intimately familiar with that. And I would just say expand your focus when you're doing day-to-day stuff to really pay attention to how your ship flies. Beyond just, we get lazy. Shooting PvE bounties is easy. You need to approach each of those with a broader thought process in terms of constantly teaching yourself how these ships fly and how you can fly them better.
Yeah, Jay is asking a question. Will CF1 certified pilots get priority for Foundations of Combat 1 and 2?
They absolutely will.
Okay. And those are people who've already demonstrated and passed a previous version of this.
Yes.
And it could be that CF1 get a requirement to attend the FOC2 class. So for FOC, we in the original plan, FOC 1 would only be open for CF1 certified pilots, but we saw that this is an advantage to the org, and we changed it so that it's accessible for everyone who attended an FOF class and showed us that he's able to control their ships. If we go the same way for FOC2, it's in discussion at the moment, and we will see how this work out for the FOC1. If we have there a gate to get to the FOC2, or if the gate will be then for the later certifications we are working on after FOC1 and 2.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. I was just sitting here thinking about all this discussion about certifications and training, and I remember back when I was doing a lot of recruiting, we had to tell people that we were going to have certifications and training, and I guess what we're saying is we mean it now. So hopefully when we mentioned that to you, you understood what that meant. But I mean, we're trying to do the hard thing, right? We're trying to herd the cats to do more than we can on our own, right? To work together as a team to be successful, and that's, you know, what I enjoy. Anything else before we move on? Nope. Okay. So now taking this a step farther and adding context and going into a blue on blue, you know, ADI org operation, we took on an escort op, and we're also going to talk a little bit about Jumptown, and in general, you know, what that means to be mission focused as opposed to kill focused. And I think that's a very, very big difference. You know, we're not doing a one-on-one PV battle or battle royale. We have some kind of goal, and that goal is the #1 target, not killing anyone who comes around. Frack, do you want to talk a little bit about that transition and a little bit about this op and kind of what we experienced?
Sure. There are two things going on. One, blue v blue ops have been something that members have been asking for a long time, partially because it's fun. You know, we do org ops all the time, and in a lot of those ops, there isn't necessarily combat, certainly not with players. And so, you know, we do those to practice, you know, how we deploy our forces and how we use our communication, how our chain of command works, and, you know, all of those things that are really important. But when it comes down to it, if you're constantly flying, you know, fighters as escorts and you never engage them with a force, they really don't know how effective they're going to be when they're engaged. And so adding OP4 to these ops not only is fun, but for us as a training staff is critical in using that. You know, we selfishly use these ops as data to inform our development and our instruction. And so, you know, and we're progressively introducing these in a way that the first OP4 of the very first op had very specific instructions on how they were going to engage, because we wanted to pull that response and that information, that data out, so that we could progress for the next one to do something a little bit different and start to gather that information on what were our vulnerabilities, what are the areas that we needed to work on and focus on when we start to teach this stuff. Because we're still building that part of the program. If you look at all the things that, and again, I'm in the air group, so I'm talking about fighters. When you look at all the things that fighters are going to be responsible for, from CAS to CAP to escort to attack, we have to build all of those training programs and doctrines so that when we are assigned that mission, we're able to complete that mission reliably. So for us in the air group, being able to do these ops is super valuable for us for development. For the members, it's just a blast. It's just fun.
And I know when we first switched to just doing some context-oriented battle, where we were trying to do an escort mission in our Fighter Mafia training, it was a huge learning curve, and there was a whole bunch of new stuff. Sertrius, what did you think about the first time we tried to do a ship escort?
That it didn't go quite as planned. Well, usually we approach when we are trying to figure out something, make up a training exercise, we have a plan, then we test it, break it, and adapt it. We modified our approach with the escort, and we had no plan, and we were doing it off the cuff, I think is the saying. And the bucket that you need to be a flight lead of an escort flight, and telling the escortee what to do, telling all the fighters what to do, knowing where the enemies are, it's a really difficult task.
Well, and one of the things that I like to do, I like to keep things open, especially in the beginning. I don't want to take any preconceived ideas that I have and inject them in to affect how the training goes, because I don't want to miss anything. And I want everyone in our Fighter Mafia group to have their contribution. So yeah, that first time was probably a little chaotic. We started talking about it more, and then we had a little bit of progression. Thornister, what did you think maybe after we did the second and third kind of attempt at doing an escort mission?
Well, we learned from them all, and we started building our tactical doctrines. We defined some standard pre-cleared responses to if certain things would happen. Like if an ambush would happen, how would we respond to it? If we expected the bandits to come from a certain direction, but all of a sudden they come from a different direction, have a standard response ready for it. And personally, the most important thing was that my own bucket just grew immensely because I just had to step into the deep end. One of the ops, I was assigned as a flight lead, but our CAC had issues with his communication, so I had to step in as a CAC without any planning for it. Well, let's just say that it was a huge learning experience.
Well, and that's the importance of having all of the tools and capabilities. Is you're going to need probably more than you have to adapt to a new situation. And, I was in the military, and it's funny you say that, having to step up, because we were always taught that you never know when something could go wrong and suddenly you're in charge, right? So, that's a oh my gosh moment. But at the same time, I'm sure you grew from that. What kind of things did you maybe grow, and how did you like that first experience having to step up like that?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. And being the guy I am, I spent a lot of time thinking about it afterwards. What could I have done better? How should I respond to certain things? How should I organize things? Normally in a fight, I tend to become target focused. So I learned that if I'm in charge, I can't do that. I need to take a step back and be more focused on overall situational awareness and directing the fight instead of fighting the fight. Indeed, the op we did afterwards, I tried that, and yeah, it worked. It was fun.
Was it so? And go ahead, Sertrius.
As a flight lead in at least one of those ops, possibly both, the importance of communication became very pronounced. In my flight, I had some members who didn't go through the whole training exercises, all of them, and their brevity or their communication was somewhat lacking, and I needed that information. I needed those call-outs to know what's happening and what should I do, what should I report to my higher up, and so on.
Yeah, and that communication stuff is so critical. And right now we don't have the best of radio systems or comms abilities in Star Citizen, and we're working with what we can, and there's probably more to that in the future. But that is so critical just to be able to make that transition. Drake, what was your experience like?
As far as the blue on blue, I think it was a good way to test out some systems. Like we were kind of working on like what would be the most effective speed for the ship we're escorting to go at. I know in the early testing we had the ship going like max speed, but then it would take forever for the escort fighters to catch up with the ship if they had to like break off to engage or to evade fire. Then by the time they turn around and they were trying to catch up with the cargo ship or whatever it was, it would be like kilometers away and it would take a long time to catch up. So it was kind of like things like that. We would learn like the proper speed that the escort ship should try to evade fire at, what kind of maneuvers they should do. And I know like one of our blue on blues, we noticed that like when ships would jump into the area to engage our ships, that they would be jumping at only 10 kilometers away, which barely gave us any time to react. So we started thinking like maybe we should change up our tactics, like have like one group like automatically go after the enemy and stuff like that. It was just kind of like, it was a learning experience for us to figure out how to best use the current game, the way the game is now, how to best use, how to best adapt to the situation that the game gives us and things. That's basically it.
Adaptation. Yeah. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, and I just want that this topic came up in chat where Aristabo asked, this episode is primarily about fighters, which it is because it's Fighter Mafia, but he's asking about, what about the CNT guy that doesn't have a HODAS? What kind of training is he going to get? And related to the topic that we're on right now and what Drake was just talking about, part of what we're using these blue on blue ops to examine is we're escorting ships. So if you're in CNT and you're part of a 3 Caterpillar convoy with ADI fighter escorts and you get attacked, do you as a Caterpillar pilot have any idea what you're supposed to do? And the answer right now is no. And the answer when we integrate these tactics, which we're in the process of building now, you will. And whether that's formations, turret coverage, speeds, what types of maneuvers, you as a pilot of a CNT ship need to know what the expectation is when your convoy comes under attack. And is that different if you're alone? If you're in your Caterpillar escorted by ADI fighters and the group gets attacked, what are you supposed to do? We are in the middle of all of those questions right now and building those integrated tactics that are going to branch out to the miners and the large combat ships and the haulers, because there's a huge variety in the fleet, and all those different categories of big ship pilots need to understand what to do when the attack comes.
Yeah, and even the freighter pilot or a capital ship pilot can assist the fighters in a combat, because if changing their speeds, they are helping our fighters to slow down the enemy so that we have a higher chance to shoot the enemy down. So in our testing prior to the B2B op, which was open to all players or all of our members, we tested different speeds, and we figured out that the high speeds are bad for us. So having the bigger ships below SCM forces the enemy also to go below SCM, and we had better opportunities to shoot them. And these are important things in operations. So the freighter pilots or the big ship pilots need to listen to the CAG, because he mostly will take over the control of the operation or the convoy and help them to stay alive. If you're not following his orders or his suggestions, there's a high chance that you will die with your Caterpillar or C2 ship.
And to just expand on this a little bit more before we get back to the actual blue on blue ops and Jumptown, I've been a part of leadership in this org for a long time. I am the director of research within one of our staff shops, and my job is beyond the Fighter Mafia. We look at other things. So whether you're a combat pilot or a miner or a cargo pilot, the things that we're going to be looking at are going to be done in the same fashion that we're doing here. We'll assemble with testing groups. We'll come up with training that's done through, getting that stuff codified. And this one's just being more public at the moment. And the people that are involved with this, I drug into episodes here, 3 now. And this is just a nice way to kind of showcase how we do things. But this similar format is going to be played out for other needs for the org and making other certifications and things that aren't just combat. So yes, this is a combat-focused podcast for what we have been doing specifically in the Fighter Mafia. To finish on this, again, if you can show proficiency with these things, you can move on regardless of your peripherals. It is a objective demonstration. That's all it is. And you have to have those skills to move on. Speaking of which, in the escorting of ships, as the person who was the ship being escorted, I can tell you that the mindset is so different from that of a combat pilot, and trying to think of, how do I place myself? How do I position it? That testing, like Frack said, has just begun. And we're going to have to start experimenting with all of those different things. And that'll be stuff that's farther down the road. But obviously, it's going to be very important as we interact with our fighters with the other groups, whether we're doing some kind of search and rescue or a mining op or whatever we're getting into. Speaking of which, I know we had some members involved with Jumptown and seeing some things there. And now we're adding in a different dynamic. Frack, did you mess around with Jumptown a little bit?
Yeah, I've run Jumptown and Xenothread a couple of times. Jumptown is the one that I prefer between the two big player events right now, just because of the integrated element of cargo, ground threats, air threats, the need to establish cap and CAS, and then have responses to when enemy players come to either try to disrupt you or take over Jumptown from you. I've loved that event. I've had events where nothing happened and I flew cap for 3 hours and didn't fire a single shot. And I've had Jumptowns where it was just a bloodbath the entire time, and I enjoy them both. But I know that the last one that we ran, where we grouped up as an org, we had procedures in place for people on the server who wanted to come in and show themselves to be cooperative and friendly, and we had responses to people who came in and didn't follow those rules. And some people got killed and some people made money, and the people who followed the rules complimented us afterwards about the level of organization, and it was a blast. It was just another opportunity to practice what future gameplay in the post server meshing, everybody on the same server world is going to look like when we truly have a persistent universe. These are the kinds of things that we're going to be doing on our own, and we need to know how to protect those landing zones and accomplish the goals that we're trying to accomplish, from the combat pilot to the cargo pilot to the Marine, and how we integrate all of those resources that we have available to us to accomplish a mission.
And, when we talked about this, you were controlling the airspace, controlling the ground down at the actual Jumptown site. And we were basically, we don't have certifications for everything that was happening, and not everyone that was there was necessarily ready for all of those things. But we were throwing ourselves into a nice test bed. I'm curious, what was the response from the community and the people that we were escorting, and the fact that we had taken over Jumptown?
Yeah, it was what I just said. The people who came in, we had a pre-announcement requirement. We would intercept incoming ships. We would escort them down. We had a no firearms out on the ground rule. We had ground security teams, and the people who just wanted to come in and load some boxes and make some money afterwards were like, they were just very complimentary of the level of organization, the way that they understood the rules. They felt safe, and they left and everything went fine, versus other experiences they had where they'd get unexpectedly attacked, or they wouldn't understand what the rules were, and it was just confusing and intimidating to them. With us, they were leaving throwing compliments up on general chat about how comfortable they felt going through that process. We had other people show up and want to take the airspace, see the assets we had there, and the response they would get when they were detected, and they would leave and not come back. Now, it doesn't mean that an org wouldn't come on and want to take that fight, and then we'd have to deal with that the best we could. But in this particular day, everything went really smoothly, and it went as smoothly as it did because of the level of organization that we put into even just a throw together event, that's being offered during the holidays. And for us, it's great practice.
It is good practice, and we learn from that. And I think that it's important to see the reaction from people in the community and get to see kind of how we put things together. Was anyone else here involved in Jumptown over the holidays? Nope. Just Frack, huh? Okay. I wasn't sure. I did some myself. My experience was terrible. I went in just to see what it was like, and I got blown up by an A2 before I got out of my ship. The second time I was inside getting a package, and I heard a big explosion outside, but I still saw the pip to my ship. I go outside, my ship was in a different location, but as soon as I got in the ship, it exploded, so that was bad. And my third try, I got shot as I walked in the door, so I was done with Jumptown. I should have participated and been a part of the organization I'm with. Maybe that would have been a good idea. But the lessons we learned, and throwing ourselves out there as an org, and seeing that, I think, is important to get us outside of the normal test bed we have, and to see new things and to work together as a group. I'm glad we did that. I know we ran some Ninetales missions as an org as well, though they weren't necessarily part of the Fighter Mafia. So I guess jumping back a little bit to the escorts, where everyone did go along, I'm curious to see what people think. If you were to say, and I'll throw this out to the group. So let's say you've gone through all the basic self-certs, you've gone through FOF, you've completed FOC1, and now you're thrown into this escort mission. What kind of things do you think it would help to think about before you got into that kind of scenario? I mean, obviously, we haven't codified these yet. We haven't made a cert. But I'm just curious what advice you might give people should you see that. Maybe Sartrius?
Learn the brevity.
Learn the brevity.
Really learn the brevity. The list is long. There are some that we use more often than others. And if you know the ones we use the most, it's a huge help. And also play with other members, jump into Mumble and experience how is it to coordinate with someone, or do even PvE bounties together with someone, to get that mindset of looking out for your wingman.
Absolutely. Thornister?
Communication is obviously key. I would say that if you want to take your FOC experience into it, just be prepared that the speed of combat, especially when the confusion grows, because in the class you will be flying as an element, but in the op, all of a sudden you have two flights of fighters, there's the escort ship, there's the bandits, the confusion grows. So be prepared to have your skills taxed to the max. It's a lot of fun, but be prepared to be thrown into the deep end.
Absolutely. There was a comment about, the brevity being a wall of text. That's why you have to look at it on a regular basis. You have to use it in context and become proficient. It is, a bit to learn, and maybe a bit of a learning curve. But I got to tell you, when the right words are said to you at the right time, that critical piece of information at that time changes everything. It can make you from, losing the fight to now winning the fight because you understand something different. Waterwalker, did you have something?
Yeah, so to come to the brevity questions in the chat. So, these wall of text, you could be afraid of this at the first time, but these are mostly what our FOF and FOC classes are for. So we are teaching you what brevity you need in which situation, and you don't need all of these 50 or 60 brevity words right from the start. So we are starting with some base brevities everybody should know in the FOF classes, and then continue over to the FOC classes where you get some more combat-orientated brevity codes. So it helps you to understand in which situation you need what brevity. And we are not we try to be exact, but if you do a mistake, but everybody understands you, it's still okay. So brevity is mostly there to have a shortened language and shorten exact communication in a stressful situation, that everybody gets aware on your situation of what you want.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no way of saying that, you have to have those proficiencies, especially taking on a context fight like, escorting a ship. The challenge is great. The reward of success is great, but, it doesn't come without practice or training. It's just not something you're going to jump into and have an instantaneous level of success. In fact, my guess is the first few times anyone tries it, just like we did, even with training, it's going to be difficult because you're going to have to grow that pilot bucket, grow the context understanding, and do those things. So unfortunately, there's a learning curve. I wish we could just inject it into everybody and we wouldn't have to have all this training, but that's just not how it works.
Yeah, I would say to your original question, Josh, about, once you've gone through FOC1, what can you do to prepare to run an escort run in an op? I would say, one, you need to constantly be working on the things that you learn in FOC1. And then beyond that, it comes down to learning your brevity, understanding your role in an element. Most people who go through FOC1, unless we have lack of signups on a particular op, you're not going to be a lead. You're not going to be a flight lead or an element lead. You're going to be a wingman. So listen to your flight lead and your element lead. They will run the engagement for you. Your job is to fill your role within that element. And if you end up in a lead position, because we have a program for that too, and you might get put in a position that's kind of above your level of training, then you need to do the best you can and listen to your CAG, because the CAG is the overall, coach of whatever role the fighters are taking in that sense, and that can make up a lot of ground if you don't feel like you've got, the level that you need to be a flight lead or an element lead. But that's the progression of chain of command. And if you're a wingman, your job is to stay with your lead, and they will run the fight.
And that's already something we are doing on our Blue on Blue Ops. So we are looking on the participation on the FOF classes, and also in the future on the FOC classes, and fill these these positions in the Blue on Blue Ops with experienced people who attended these classes, so that we have their experienced people who can lead then a wingman which hasn't these experience, or maybe also fill in the spots of the wingman also with experienced people, and put all the other people mostly on the gunner seats, because we want these Blue on Blue Ops also as a training for our pilots to get better and better, because training in a training class is something different than in a Blue on Blue Op. Because we have real fights, there is a lot of hectic inside, a lot of things changing, a lot of communication, even with the brevity. And with 2 or more flights, it's getting even more confused. Who is on which target, who's protecting the asset, what I'm doing. If my enemy is down, should I return to the asset? Should I go over to the enemy and help the other flight? All this stuff is counting in. So we are looking more and more on the people, on their certifications, and on their trainings to fill in the positions on the Blue on Blue Ops. And there will be the next Blue on Blue Ops from Air Group will be this month, in about 2 weeks. We have one, and we are working on a bigger one for February with some new elements in it. So yeah, keep an eye on the forum and on the Discord when we announce this, and sign up. It will be fun.
Spoctavian Augustus asks, as a competitive person, why am I grasping for things to do to build competency independently? So I want to take a stab at that, and then I want to open up to my panel. One, there are some individual skills that you'll need, but most of what we're talking about is group or team, flight lead and wingman oriented. So that means participating in ops, participating in training, studying the brevity. Certainly you can do on your own, but I'll tell you, it's one thing to be able to recite it. It's another thing to use it in context and understand it. So I would encourage anyone with that question to participate in the ops, participate in the training, and work together. What do you guys think?
100% agree. Like we said before, this is something you need to do over and over and over again. Use it or lose it. And unfortunately, group work, teamwork is really hard to practice on your own. There is no shortcut to it. There is no workaround. You have to sign up for the classes, for the ops, for the missions. Fortunately, the ops are a lot of fun, so please sign up. See why you are part of ADI. Enjoy what ADI has to offer for you. And let's have some fun together.
I think Spoctavian and I need to talk, because his curiosity and his interest that he's expressing in the chat is exactly the kind of person I want on my team. And it's not, there is a lot you can do. It's just not a topic we can cover live right now just because of the time constraints we're under, but you and I need to talk, and we need to talk about your future here.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Take the energy and harness it into something. Well, before we close out this show, does anybody else have anything they want to say before we go? No? Okay.
It was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed everyone being here. I really enjoyed this show. This is something we wanted to do for a long time. These guys here, I cannot tell you how many hours they have put in to making this possible. They sacrificed time even during the holidays to get this out so that we could have it available, so we could announce it. And I'm just very happy to discuss that. In terms of where we are going, there are many ops coming up, and I want to discuss those here really quick. On Saturday the 12th, we have Operation Rising Sun. That's next Saturday. It's a 12-hour event. It's the first time we're doing this. So we're testing the endurance capability of our large org. We have, members in various time zones across the world, and we're going to see if we can put something together to work together as a team and conduct an operation over a very long period of time. I'll be driving back that day. I'm sorry, it's the 15th. There was an error in the announcement I was reading. It is actually the 15th. So next Saturday, the 15th. I'll be driving back from a vacation, so I may get back in time. We'll see, but I'd like to participate in that. I like to see the lessons we learn and stuff like that. The next event after that is today at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. We have Unfriendly Neighbor. That's an op that you can sign up for. Again, to learn things and to test and study your brevity. And finally, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, there's the MSS Marine Search and Rescue mission that's coming up. That actually sounds really fun. So if you're looking to get involved, ADI, through the Christmas break, things kind of ramp down. As things are coming back up, they're going to see a lot of training and a lot of ops and a lot more stuff coming forward. And I'm looking forward to that. I thank you for joining in and watching. The next episode of HangarReady will be next month. We don't have a date yet, but stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Bye-bye.
Bye.